Welcome, Fraser. Cain, it's so exciting to be able to meet you. I've heard so much about you from Kevin and the amazing content that you're delivering. Can you remind our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you came to be involved in space?
Well, I am the publisher of the Universe Today website, which is a space and astronomy website that I've been running for almost 25 years now. Uh, I've been a space science reporter. I've traveled around the world. I've met astronauts, astronomers, cosmologists. I've interviewed Nobel Prize winners. So I've had a great career just being a science communicator. I am also the co-host of the Astronomy Cast podcast, which I do with Dr. Pamela Gay. We've been doing that for almost 15 years now. And then also I do a ton of videos on YouTube about space and astronomy, as well as interviews with experts in the field.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think, when we look at YouTube as teachers, right? At first we're like, oh, what is this venue? But now it's like become almost a given. Any teacher anywhere is going to YouTube to get some of that content necessary. So with this background that you had and you started breaking out into the internet as your source, you started with probably the older school method of just was it just in typing, or was it old school journaling where you're keeping blogs like that before you went online?
No, I've always been just online. So like my professional career began really with the beginning of the internet. And it was really obvious to me that I would just need to do this on the internet. And so, no, I have no background in print or any kind of traditional media broadcasting. Everything I've done has always just been internet only since 1999.
It's hard to imagine, like, honestly, I know, because I was born in like 72. And so you're right. When you think about the advent of this technology, it really is old now, right? It's not as new as it seemed to be.
So am I right in that your background is computer science? That's how you originally began as sort of an adult in the world. And when did it become I'm going to pivot from my day job to what I'm going to call your side hustle and make that the full-time hustle?
Right. Yeah. So like as a child, I was really interested in space. I watched the space shuttle launch in 1981 for the first time. I was excited about the Voyager spacecraft, the Viking landers. I was born a little too late to really comprehend the Apollo landings, but my dad sure did. Watched meteor showers with my family. I bought my first telescope when I was 14 years old. When I went to high school, I was in the journalism program and wrote stories about space and astronomy for our school newspaper. So I guess that's my print background.
Right.
But then for some reason, I went into engineering actually at University of British Columbia, and then switched over to computer science and left that early to go and actually join computer startups in Vancouver. And sort of did that for, I guess, in various companies, various startups for about 8 years or so. And I was working at a web development firm in Vancouver and building websites for large institutional clients. So my clients were things like big banks, trading companies, power companies, things like that. And I had all these crazy ideas, and none of my clients, my stodgy bank clients, were willing to try out my ideas. So I thought, well, I've got to start a website on the side, which will allow me to perform experiments that I can then take the lessons that I've learned and bring them back and give practical advice to my clients. And so I picked one of my hobbies at random. And of course, the one that had been present through my entire life was space and astronomy. I wanted to learn more about space and astronomy. I was in the middle of reading Pale Blue Dot and The Case for Mars. And I was sort of like really inspired. I was on a space kick. And I was like, well, I'll just start a website about space. I want to learn more about space, but I also want to try out my nutty ideas about running websites, like updating them on a regular basis or building a email mailing list to communicate with my audience.
Tiered subscriptions, all that. I mean, the world behind that is just like incredible. You have to learn just how to get it going to keep it bigger.
Yeah, I mean, like having a computer science degree made it possible for me to do all this stuff, especially when it was all a lot less automated and you had to do things the hard way. And I wouldn't have been able to afford to hire a web developer or a server administrator or anything, but I could do all that stuff. So I was able to be the publisher in a digital sense. And it was great. Like absolutely within 6 months, a year, I had learned a mountain of lessons. I was able to provide really practical advice to my clients, but also there was this growing desire to go like, you know what, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. Like I'm having so much fun communicating space and astronomy, researching this stuff, writing stories. I don't want to make websites for banks anymore. Thanks.
Right.
So as you say, you know, what started off as I guess like a non-revenue side hustle, a learning side hustle, I was able to bring on some initial sponsors and advertisers, and within a couple of years, able to transition into just making this my career. And I haven't looked back. Like for the first, say, 8 years or so, it was just me. Then I was able to bring on some freelance writers, and now we have a pretty big team, probably about 10 to 15 writers, video editors, podcast editors, programmers. Like it's a pretty big team at this point.
That's fantastic. I can't imagine anything less than, you have millions of eyeballs per year on your content, right? That's very impressive. When do you think, because I feel like most space people they're not just reporting it space. I think there's 3 levels of how you get immersed in space. First, you report it, then you analyze it, and then you really become an advocate. Do you find that you are sometimes less of a reporter and more of an analyst and an advocate? Or do you find that you take different roles at different times on a particular story? Because it feels like we're always dealing with a skeptical, uneducated population, right, in general, and we want to elevate their understanding, and space brings such an inspiration value. So I'll stop there and let you elaborate on those points.
Yeah, I mean, like I really try to be unbiased in terms of like political things like that. You know, I try to maintain a high level of journalistic integrity in what we do in reporting the various actions that are happening. You know, we report on what's happening from the United States, but also Europe, Canada, Japan, China, United Arab Emirates, and Russia, you know, and there are political threads that sort of tie those all together, and various people will be outraged at various places because I'm not providing the right political narrative to the things that I'm reporting on. But I have a pro space bias. I am for space, and I am for and I am more biased towards action by smaller groups than by larger institutional groups. So I'm very excited by the new space movement, by entrepreneurs, by CubeSats, experiments, anyone who's willing to take a risk and try out a new idea. I will give that more sort of prominence in my reporting than, you know, the work that's being done by the larger space companies, the traditional aerospace firms.
Well, I have a million questions, particularly because I too want to get to the point where, you know, we can figure out how to make what we're doing now, which is something we both really love doing, but make it to where it's, you know, not waiting on us to finish our day job. But I want to talk a little bit about what you are providing. So this content, Universe Today, imagine our listeners are going to be teachers, space enthusiasts. What could they find on your site? So let's talk content.
Sure. So like I said, we have a dozen-ish freelance writers that are reporting on space and astronomy stories every day. So we have anywhere between 5 to 10 new stories come onto Universe Today every day. I also will interview 1 to 2 people in the field every week, and then we publish those as videos on my YouTube channel. I also do a question show where a live question show where I'll tackle people's questions about space and astronomy, and then we edit that down into a question show. And then I also do a news segment every week that we call Space Bites, and I'm just sort of giving a roundup of the news. And then I also write a fairly comprehensive email newsletter once a week that is, you know, sometimes it can be 10,000 words. It can be very big, depending on how much news is breaking this week.
Mm-hmm.
And And then I think the thing that teachers will find very important is that everything we create is released with a Creative Commons 4.0 license. So you're free to take anything that we create, be it video, be it text, audio, and remix it and include it in anything that you want, whether it's for educational purposes, for commercial purposes, I don't care. Do it, scrape my entire website, make your own version of it, be my guest. And so like we don't own the pictures. So like if you don't ask me for permission for the pictures, because we're trying to get we get a license for the pictures from the original source, but for the text, for the video, for the audio, fill your boots. And we're able to do that because of the way that we're financed. A big part of how we're financed is through advertising. But at this point, an even bigger way that we're financed is through our patrons. And the patrons are able to smooth out the highs and lows of revenue to the point that I just keep finding places to remove advertising from what we do and shift more and more towards just servicing the community of supporters who are interested in space, like our coverage, and want us to be able to release this information as widely as we can out into the world.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, I'm very excited about the democratization of space because, our first satellite, we're middle school kids to actually launch a satellite. So we went from nations launching to a motivated middle school, high school with a good network and a few resources. So with that, this new commercialization of space, is there any particular area with industrial applications, exploration? What are some of your favorite things that are happening right now in the new space movement?
I mean, the trends that I'm most fascinated with are things like space-based manufacturing, assembly, space-based, on-orbit assembly, ways that you can take smaller payloads up to space and then create the structures that will then serve some more comprehensive role. I mean, there's some great companies that are doing things like being able to 3D print trusses in space, being able to create flexible mirrors and various structures. You can imagine a fairly small spacecraft being able to launch and then perform a role that's punching way above its weight. Mm-hmm. I'm really excited by the miniaturization and commoditization of space hardware, that you can launch a CubeSat with a group of middle schoolers. That is, that the cost to develop the satellite itself is minuscule, and yet it can perform some of the same functions as a much larger, more capable spacecraft. And then you've got the decreasing launch costs. And so you can do these ride shares where you sneak your payload in around the nooks and crannies of some larger satellite, and you're able to get this kind of functionality. And I think we're in the middle of this revolution where there are really kind of two paths. You've got the traditional aerospace firms that build their Battlestar Galactica communication satellites, and they launch them to geostationary orbit, and they are enormous and but they're millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you've got the people who are working on these small CubeSats, where the development costs could be a few $1,000s, and then you can get the good graces of NASA or SpaceX to sneak in on a ride share, and then it's only a few more tens of thousands of dollars to launch your satellite. And I think what's missing is the maturity of the small sat side, where you can fill in all of these little niches in the ecosystem, and that's still being figured out as we speak. And it's almost like the new technology is coming so fast that people can't digest what's possible.
True.
And so then everything feels like an experiment. Nothing is ever settling down anymore.
Right.
And it would be great to sort of see that trend where we have these tried and true methodologies where the costs are very low, the components are off the shelf, the costs of launching these CubeSats into space. There's a very well-known pipeline for being able to get these CubeSats into space, and you can just high school goes, grabs all the parts, puts them all together, builds their one UCubeSat, puts it on a ride, sends it off to SpaceX. They include it on their ride share, and you're in space on the next launch.
Well,
Right.
and then
And
all
then-
those lessons that come after that for those students who might have done that, right? I mean, it's just the lessons that are
Yeah.
inherent in the building and the
Right.
beyond.
We always lean on the emphasis with younger students on soft skills, collaboration and creativity. The temporal resolution, right? Flocks, you get these little 3U remote sensing CubeSats. They can go up so quickly, and they're in a low enough orbit that they have a short lifetime. I think the cost price point is so low that you can iterate them and improve them.
Yeah.
And the frequency with which you can launch them. So you can put a flock up, every so often. We're sort of outrunning our capability to, for instance, process all the zeros and ones and send them down. We don't even have the bandwidth to get down all the data that we can generate. So that's a new area for optimization, right?
And I think that's what's missing is that infrastructure. Like, I think when there is this really nice established communications infrastructure that's in space, whether it's Starlinks or something, whatever, and that you can launch your little CubeSat and then it bolts itself into the communication infrastructure, then you no longer have to worry about transmitters and how are we going to get this data back down. You know that when the thing launches, it's got a 5G antenna on it that's going to connect into the Starlink network, and you're going to be able to get your data in real time, no matter where it is around the earth. Like there are a lot of infrastructure parts that once in place will make these much more feasible. Like it's crazy. You think about like, oh, I've got this really interesting application for a CubeSat that could do Earth observation or astronomical data or experiments in space or zero gravity research, all kinds of things. And then you hit but how are you going to get your data home problem?
True.
And you just go like, are we going to build ground stations around the earth? Are we going to transmit our data back home using UHF once every 3 days? It's brutal. And yet the solutions are out there and they're being constructed right now. And so I think that's one of the biggest ones. If you get this really comprehensive communications infrastructure that's available to these satellite networks, then the imagination really opens up. And we're not there yet.
No, we're not.
And
in fact, we had to optimize our radios that we use, talk to Global Star or Iridium, because I could not, we couldn't capture enough zeros and ones just with our Yagi antennas out in the yard when it passed over.
Right.
So but the trade-off in using that kind of network, very small telemetry packets, right? So we had to be we can't stream live video from our CubeSat. We have to have very small bytes in our packets.
So I think once we get to a place where we've got a lot of off-the-shelf hardware and software, we've got really best practices for the way these things launch. You've got a really nice pipeline from taking these things to launch through SpaceX or any of the other launch providers. And you've got a really established space infrastructure to support these CubeSats. Then I think you will see a real blossoming of what's possible and this iterative cycle and kids being able to come up with ideas for a few $1,000s and 3 months development, they're in space. That could be the final project of that year is to design and develop
or even
and
over
build
a few years where they come up.
Yeah.
It takes more than a year. Oftentimes the proposals
Exactly.
that Kevin's kids are doing, they start maybe like their 9th grade year. By the time they're in 11th or 12th grade, they're actually seeing it come to fruition, which is, there's that. But it seems like obviously you have like a real wealth of solid information. So who are, like, when you think about your clients and you said, you're basically being funded by your patrons, who are your patrons? Who is your ideal customer, your avatar, so to speak?
Right. I mean, like for me, it's a wide range of people. I'm really honored that in some cases it is actual working astronomers, space scientists, engineers that are in the field. And then in other cases, it is enthusiasts they're a doctor or a an engineer in some other field, but they've always been interested in space and they want to keep one foot in that field. Or it's kids, it's people who are enthusiastic about space and astronomy, but have no sort of overlap in the field. You know, they run a garden shop, but are really interested in space. So I'm like really. So here's the thing. Like when I report on space news, when I'm choosing stories, all I'm interested in is the things that are making me curious. What am I curious about today? Right now, I'm kind of obsessed with Venus. I'm obsessed with new ideas to practically explore space and astronomy. And then we as an organization report on those stories that I'm curious about. And then those stories resonate with the audience.
Yeah.
I don't pick like my avatar is the person who is fascinated by the same stuff as me.
Well, that's what it sounds like. It's basically that you get to talk about what you love, and you figured out that it doesn't matter the age. Somebody who loves that is going to be listening regardless.
Yeah. So I don't spend 1 second trying to think about what my audience wants.
Yeah.
I just think about what I'm curious about, explore it, and trust that there's enough people out there that are fascinated by the same topics as me.
Quick analytics question. How many different countries are represented in the folks that regularly use your content?
I have no idea. All of them. I mean, like, you know, like we've had close to 50 million people come to our website. So, you
That's
know,
fantastic.
it
But
roughly matches the number of English speaking people around the world. Like if you just take the demographics of humanity that speaks English, our audience roughly matches that, like whatever, 65% American, 15% Canadian, 10% Australian, 15% English, 4% Irish, and then you see people in English speaking people in other countries as well.
So you're an astronomical influencer,
I guess.
I love that idea. I think for me, you know, we're in a different time, and as I'm older, it's like I hear myself sounding more and more like my own parents, right? But I really do think it says a lot that you've been able to take something that you love, you've turned it into not just your passion, but your career. And you're making these concepts accessible to kids who would, just in general, adults who wouldn't otherwise have it, whether, as you pointed out, they're in a different career field, so they don't know how to get their fix anymore. And if they're listening to a podcast or whatever on their way to work, that's how they can still embrace that. Or kids who don't have that content. So you're really providing that passion in for areas that wouldn't otherwise, for the students wouldn't be able to have, or those people just wouldn't have. Filling a gap.
Yay.
Well, and we always try to kind of close our segments with some advice. What advice do you have for our listeners out there who might be interested in maybe taking the chance of finding their passion and bringing it to an online world, or particularly with a relation to space, even who might be interested in pursuing something more? And then please take some time to plug, like where we can find you, like all your social stuff would be good.
Advice. I mean, I don't really have advice because I'm actually not a fan of the follow your passion.
Oh, cool.
Route. I think following your passion is kind of a bad idea, because following your, like, as a career, I think that, you know, if you want a career, you want to pick something that allows you to become really good at some skill. And you definitely don't want to hate the skill, but I don't think that the skill should be your passion. I think that we can, what creates passion is developing an expertise in a field. The better we get at something, the more opportunities open to us, the more interesting work that we get to work on. So I don't like the idea of follow your passion. I like get really good at something that you don't hate, and you will find that it becomes your passion over time. Like the benefits are about having sort of the ability to work on projects that you find interesting, the ability to interact with other people who you really respect, having freedom and autonomy to choose the kinds of work that you want to do, getting a salary that makes you not have to make a lot of sacrifices in your life. So I think those are all the things that are more important for a career than it being your passion. Passion doesn't take you very far. It really sort of passion as a driver kicks you out the side of the car partway through the journey and you're left to walk. So that's all. So that's my advice. It's just like pick a career that is of demand, that is ideally paid. I mean, maybe that's the part that I messed up, but I figured it out over time. And you don't hate, but has almost limitless opportunity for you to hone your craft, to become an expert, and to get better and better. That's my advice from a
I'm
career
so glad to
standpoint.
hear you say that. I'm of the same ilk, because for me, when someone says, what's your passion? I'm like, it changes. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
if I could think of, and so I always felt like, well, I'm just kind of messed up. What am I going to do? I don't really know what my passion is, but I do have skills. And you're right. Within those
Yeah.
skills that I've gotten really, really good at certain things,
Yeah.
I can then dabble and explore all kinds of things. So thank you, because that was
Yeah.
inspirational for me.
Yeah, I think career satisfaction comes from, for me, expertise. The better, like, and as a craftsperson who is making a thing, and that thing happens to be a media network of space news reporting, when it gets better and better, it makes me happier. It makes me, like, the quality of the product that I make gives me job satisfaction, and also resonates with the audience. And I think that's the key.
That's great.
When it comes to shamelessly self-promoting myself, of course, I'm Universe Today on all the things, but the thing that I'm proudest of, I think, is this email newsletter that I send out every week. Like I said, it is this magazine, beautiful pictures. I write every word in a very kind of consistent way. Have been doing it for decades at this point. And I think, there's 65,000 people subscribed to this thing. So I think if anyone is interested in, like, it is sort of the end product of my entire week of researching space and astronomy news and then boiling it down into everything comprehensively that I can think of. And so, like, I think if people signed up to the newsletter and then they had to winnow down every single resource that they use, my hope is that this would be the last thing that they would cling to before finally abandoning all space news. So that is the machine that I hope that I'm creating and providing to people to service. So go to universetoday.com/newsletter, and then you can sign up. It's free, no ads. I write every word. You can unsubscribe anytime, no commitments. Check that out.
Thank you
We'll
so
definitely
much.
put that in the bio link too. So when we get that bio, we'll add that all in the show notes. Thank you.
I just want to make sure you have an open invitation when you make your way to Florida, because watching launches up close is always fun.
Oh yeah.
We want to be able to hook up and meet with you live and in person, and really I would love for my satellite team to meet you as well. I appreciate the perseverance that you've shown to develop your craft. So, and we want to thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.